Hey, what's going on? Bryce McNabb with McNabb Storytelling, and today we're talking about something that I have been doing for my entire career over the past 10 years. We're gonna be going over interviews. Let's get to it. Tip 1, silence. Silence is key. You know, essentially the goal of an interview, aside from getting a great authentic interview, and we'll get into that, is that you want to isolate your interviewee's voice. And because of that, you don't want to introduce additional noises into the audio track. So you want to be as silent as possible. Because of that, I find that clipboards are totally awesome. I love clipboards. They help me to keep my papers steady, and they're great for when I need to jot down notes as I'm listening to them. The other tip with my clipboard is that I usually put a stack of papers beneath my interview questions. The reason for this is, if I've got my pen, versus using a stack of papers really helps to dampen the sound. You're not gonna get these tapping scratches, it's gonna be a lot more dampened, okay? So that is crucial. Have interview questions, okay? Actually, the first time I started interviewing people, I never used questions, and that was a total fail. I remember that I was interviewing somebody, and I had just asked them a question, and they answered it, and my mind drifted off during their answer, and it came back to me to ask them the next question, and I literally didn't listen to anything they just said. And I was like completely incapable of asking them a follow-up question. I had no idea what we were even talking about. That was super embarrassing. You would think the obvious thing would be to have questions and to be prepared with that, but you know, I didn't learn that immediately. So definitely have questions. How I map out my questions is essentially during pre-production, I conduct a pre-interview phone call with my interview subject. Now, this accomplishes two goals. The first goal is it helps me understand more about who they are and gives me an understanding of what their story will be, so I understand what story I'm going to tell. The second goal it accomplishes is that they then get to know me and it starts to build a relationship between us. We then start to build a rapport, right? Which is crucial for having a very successful interview, is that I'm not waiting until the interview itself to try to ramp up getting comfortable with each other and building a relationship. It's very difficult to get comfortable with someone when you just throw them in the hot seat. They're freaking out, right? So you wanna make sure that you establish that relationship early. So that way they're at least familiar with your voice, if not your face, that they have an understanding of who you are and what you're like. So that way when they come and they sit in an interview, this is now, I know this guy and I like this guy. And so you sort of now pick up where you left off, right? And so they're more comfortable and you're going to get a better interview from that. The other thing is once you figure out what their story is, usually I map out the story in an outline format ahead of time because I understand what we want to focus on. I kind of get a sense of what our angle is. And then I sort of like jot out a fake script for the story, kind of just betting, hey, this is what I think we might talk about. Once I have that written out, that's where I get my questions. I just reverse engineer what I think they're going to say, and I make those my questions. And then what I do with my questions is I don't just have random bullet points of questions. I used to do this, but I realized it made interviewing people extremely difficult and frustrating because I would just have this list of just random questions and I found myself ping-ponging across the list the entire way I was doing this, the entire time I'm doing my interviews. And because I'm moving back and forth across my bullet points, I would often leave my interviews having not asked very critical questions to the story. What I do now is I take an extra step to try to think through what is a logical flow that the conversation will go that I'm having with this person, and then I arrange those questions in that format. So here's a couple bonus tips. I took a acting class when I was in college, and it was this method acting class. And essentially what you start to learn about method acting is basically just embodying an emotion and communicating that emotion. And what happens that's very interesting when you're actually talking to somebody is that you start to mirror people's movements and you mirror their behaviors. And you have to keep in mind that as you're running the interview, you are leading that engagement, right? You're in the driver's seat and you essentially are in control and they are following your lead. Even though you're asking the questions, they're responding to you. And just like in any interview, whoever asks the questions has the power within that encounter and within that dynamic. So you have a lot of responsibility as an interviewer to make sure that you're leading that engagement well, right? And a lot of that is in this thing that's called mirroring, right? We do this when we're on a date with somebody and we really like them. What will happen is we will actually like mirror their body language, right? Like if they smile, we'll smile. If they like cross their arms, we might lean back and we might cross our arms. You become a reflection of the person sitting across from you. And when someone does that, subconsciously, we don't consciously pick it up as being imitated, right? Unless you're being like stupid obvious about it, they might think that you're purposefully imitating them. But if you're just like natural with it, they're going to start feeling this positive bond between you two, and they're going to start mirroring back to you. And so, so going back to the embodying the emotions thing, if I know that my expectation is that I want them to deliver, say, this question, but I need it delivered in a positive way, right? Well, then I'm gonna flip on feeling happy, and then I'm gonna ask them that question in a positive way, so that way they reflect and they mirror that happiness back at me. And throughout the entire time they're talking to me, I'm just gonna be open, and I'm gonna be beaming that positive energy. Because keep in mind, you have to be quiet the whole time. You can't have, as much as you want it to be an authentic conversation, you can't engage in the way that you would a normal conversation. You can't breathe loud, right? You can't do that. You can't make additional noise rubbing your clothing or anything. And you can't go like, because that's gonna get picked up in your audio track. So a lot of times you'll have to be like, so you look like this big goofy idiot when you're interviewing people for the most part, but how you respond to them via body language is often I'm responding to them in the way that I'm hoping they're emotionally going to deliver the message. So if it's a serious thing, I'm gonna lean forward so that way they'll potentially lean forward, because when you lean forward with someone, when you speak to them, it denotes a serious connotation to the question, to the topic, right? And if you soften your eyes with that, then you're communicating this empathy to them to allow them to be vulnerable with you, right? So yeah, it all feels like manipulation, but really this is all putting them at ease so that way you're not being a dork, right? Like you're not just like having this stilted interview. And a lot of times, these stilted interviews are because you're actually nervous when you're interviewing the person. It's not their job to calm you down. It's your responsibility to create this calm atmosphere. So keep quiet, right? Arrange your questions in a logical order based on the story you want to tell, and then keep in mind mirroring. And remember that you're in control of the conversation, that you're driving the ship, and that in order to get the specific emotions that you want to get, you have to embody those emotions because you're then inviting them into that emotional space with you. All right, hope that was helpful, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.